Welcome to Aylesford Priory. It is famous for its association with St. Simon's Stock, and you can see here a major relic, which is the cranium, or the back of the skull. St. Simon's Stock died in 1265, and he was buried in Bordeaux Cathedral, where he had been travelling at the time. But the tradition is that he was originally a Kentish man, like myself, either from the village of Stoke or the village of Stockbury, and both are very close to Aylesford Priory. He joined the Carmelites, and he was in the order in the time of change. The original hermits came from Mount Carmel, hence the name Carmelites, and they travelled to Europe in the time of the fall of the Latin kingdom of Jerusalem. But when they arrived in Europe, they found that their life of hermits was no longer practical, because they had been given properties and houses and new communities in big towns and cities. And they soon settled in places like Cambridge, Oxford, and also London. So in 1247, the Carmelites gathered here at Aylesford, and they had their first general chapter that was held outside of the Holy Land, and that they sent a petition to Pope Innocent IV to have their rule changed. So in effect, they changed from hermits to mendicant friars. So they had a more active way of life. So it was practical for them to live in cities and towns. Simon Stock became Prior General around this time. So he is a figure of change. He is a figure of going out and doing something new, very boldly. But the tradition is that he received the scapular vision. Now, I wear the Carmelite scapular, and basically it is like an apron, and that people now wear little scapulars, and it reminds them of following in the footsteps of Mary, as St. Simon's Stock, by tradition, received a vision of Our Lady. And that we encourage people to wear the little brown scapulars, and that it is a reminder that they're putting on Our Lady's mantle, that they're following in the footsteps of Mary, and that Mary was that first disciple of Jesus. And so we follow in her footsteps and we imitate Mary. And that in effect, there's no prayer associated with this scapular, but the first prior here, Father Malachi Lynch, encouraged people to, when they put on their scapular every morning, to say the words, "Use me today." And by wearing the scapular, we are deepening our baptism commitment, because we are following in the footsteps of Mary, who was that disciple of Jesus, and that we're becoming more Christ-like. So the scapular is an outward reminder of living out our vocation as followers and disciples of Christ. Relics here came here in 1951. They were the gift of the Archbishop of Bordeaux, and that they're now kept in what we call the reliquary, which resembles Mount Carmel and the original homes of the first Carmelites. In the relic chapel, it is dominated by the ceramics by the Polish artist Adam Kosowski. He himself has an interesting story. He was an established artist in his own right in Poland, but during the Second World War, he was a foot soldier and he was captured by the Russians and was sent to a labor camp in Siberia. But he vowed that if he escaped alive, he would dedicate his life as an artist in honor of Our Lady. Once he was released from Siberia, he eventually made his way to England, and he was befriended by the Catholic Guild of Artists. And Philip Lindsay Clark, who also has work here, was the chairman of the Catholic Guild of Artists. And he brought Adam Kosowski down to Aylesford soon after the Carmelites returned. And he was told that Father Malachi might give him 1 or 2 commissions. He worked here off and on for over 20 years. We have paintings, sculptures, but what we remember him most is for the ceramics. You'll see ceramics outside along the Rosary Way, and then ceramics that tell the Carmelite story. But we see now the Stations of the Cross, and for me they're very powerful because I feel that only someone who has suffered, as Adam Kosowski did, and the labor camp in Siberia, is able to interpret the sufferings of Christ. We see here Mary, or the mother of Jesus, and the beloved disciple at the foot of the cross. This is an important image for the Carmelites because this gospel is the gospel that is read every year on the feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel. And it reminds us that Mary is given to the beloved disciple as the mother of the disciple. But in a sense, she becomes the mother of all humanity. She is the mother of the church. She is a sign of the church in its perfection, of how Christ would like the church to be. We are now in the Carmelite Saints Chapel, and that this chapel is interesting because at the very back here, you have images of Mount Carmel, and the very center is the little chapel dedicated to Our Lady, because the Carmelites regard Mary as our model, and that they were soon known as the brothers of the Blessed Virgin Mary of Mount Carmel, and that the altarpiece represents the Holy Sepulchre, the tomb of Jesus, because the Carmelites have special devotion to the rite of the Holy Sepulchre, and that we particularly celebrate the resurrection, because the early medieval Carmelites every Saturday would celebrate a little resurrection. And you can see at either side are Carmelite saints. And the very centre is a Flemish wood carving of the giving of the scapular to St. Simon's Stock by Our Lady. And I would just point out some of the famous Carmelite figures. The most famous are the women. Therese, the little flower, and you can see you have the rose there. And we remember her for saying that she wants to be love in the heart of the church, and that she spoke in a little way of God's love, mercy, and compassion. She was, of course, a follower of the great Saint Teresa, who lived in the 16th century in Spain and was a great reformer. You'll see up here a sister without a name, and she reminds us that all of us are called to a life of holiness, and that we are all part of the communion of saints. If we now go over to the men, the most famous would be Saint John of the Cross. Again, a contemporary of Teresa of Avila, a Spanish reformer of the order, and a great poet. Up here you see Titus Brandsma, who was a victim of the Holocaust, as was another great Carmelite, Edith Stein, or better known as Sister Teresa Benedicta of the Cross. We are now at the main shrine, and it is dominated by this very beautiful but simple statue of Our Lady. And it is, of course, Our Lady of the Assumption, and it is modelled upon the book of Revelations, a book of Apocalypse, where we read a woman standing on the moon, crowned with the stars. And this is a reminder that the original medieval church, built by the Carmelites in 1247, was dedicated to the Assumption of Our Lady. Around the shrine, there are a number of angels. We have the Archangel Michael, we have the Archangel Gabriel, and the Archangel Raphael. But for us, the most interesting one is the Archangel, the patron of Aylesford. And this is a reminder that all of us have our own guardian angel who protects us. And it is also a reminder that of the beauty of God's creation, and not everything can be seen. And so you can see the village of Aylesford at the bottom of the angel's feet, and then in his hands is the newly built shrine of Our Lady. We are now in St. Joseph's Chapel, and this was the last of the chapels to be decorated by Adam Gosowski, and it was intended to be a celebration of the Scriptures and reminds us of the importance of the Word of God in the Carmelite tradition, because the first Carmelites in their rule were instructed by St. Albert to go into their cells and ponder on the law of the Lord, to ponder on the Word of God. And that's we have both ceramics telling the story of the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Old Testament stories are about the prophet Elijah, who is a figure of inspiration for the first Carmelites, because they settled at the spring of Elijah on Mount Carmel. And the New Testament's images tell the story of St. Joseph. You can see the marriage of Joseph and Mary, the dream of Joseph, the birth of Jesus, with both the Magi or the kings and the shepherds. And then we have the flight into Egypt. And then finally, the finding of the boy Jesus in the temple. We are now at the Scapular Vision Shrine here along the Rosary Way. And it tells the story of the scapular vision. We see Mary with the baby Jesus blessing the scapular of St. Simon Stock. And as you know, the scapular reminds us of we follow in the footsteps of Mary, that first disciple of Jesus, and that we do not know where the scapular vision took place. There is one tradition, it took place here at Aylesford, so that we have this shrine here dedicated to the scapular vision. There is another tradition, it may have taken place in Cambridge. But this shrine reminds us the importance, above all, of the scapular, and for all those who wear the scapular, that they want to become more Christ-like. And you'll see underneath the ceramics, there is this little plaque, and it reminds us that when the shrine was built, earth from the Holy Land, from Mount Carmel, was brought here. So there's a clear link between Aylesford and the first church of the Carmelites on Mount Carmel. And Carmel itself means garden of the Lord. So it is rather appropriate that we have this shrine to the scapular vision along this beautiful Rosary Way. We are now in the medieval buildings, and we have this cloister chapel, and it is the oldest chapel here at Aylesford. And you'll see the altar is built from stone from the original medieval church that was taken down during the reign of Henry VIII, approximately in the 1540s. But what is of interest is this beautiful stained glass window, and you can see it has the words of a hymn that is sung by Carmelites every night, the Flos Carmeli, which means flower of Carmel. And Carmel, of course, means garden of the Lord. You'll also see a very simple little statue by Adam Kosowski in ceramic, and it is of St. Jude. And that St. Jude is traditionally the patron saint of difficult cases or hopeless cases. And this came about because St. Jude was frequently mistaken for Judas, who betrayed Jesus, that St. Jude was the forgotten apostle. So now he is the patron saint of forgotten people. You'll also see in this chapel a little statue called the Infant of Prague. And this is a reminder of the importance of the incarnation, of a little baby who becomes king of the universal king. So we see the costumes worn by the little baby, and we change them according to the liturgical season. The buildings that you see date back to the 1350s. Though the Pilgrims' Hall is much earlier, it goes back to 1280. But sadly, the original medieval church was destroyed at the Reformation. But you can see the yellow paving stones that outline the foundations of the original church. At the Reformation, the friars became a country house. But we were able to return in 1949. And since then, Aylesford has become a sense of pilgrimage and retreat. And we're very pleased that one of the groups that regularly come here on pilgrimage are the Syro-Malabar community. And recently we had a pilgrimage with Bishop Joseph, and a small group from the Syro-Malabar community worship here every Sunday. And we're very pleased with the links that we have, and they're a big support to the Carmelite community here at Aylesford. The Rosary Way has some of the earliest ceramics by Adam Kosowski. And of course, the Rosary tells the story of Jesus and Mary. And you will see these beautiful ceramics from the Annunciation of the birth of Jesus to the coronation of Mary. We have the joyful mysteries that tell of the joyful events and the life of Mary. The sorrowful mysteries that tell us of the passion of Jesus. And finally, we have the glorious mysteries, beginning with the resurrection and ending with the coronation of Our Lady. The Peace Garden. The Peace Garden was established just over 10 years ago, and it is in 5 different compartments, reminding us of fire, wind, and water, some of the principal elements. And there also are tiles with the word peace in different languages. We are now in what is called the Prior's Hall, which is dominated by this 19th century table, and we have elm tree was felled and that actually was grown here at the Friars. But what is of interest are these paintings that tell the story of the Carmelites. But I would also like to reflect with you on the importance of pilgrimage. The Friars before the Reformation was not an important place for pilgrimage, but we did welcome pilgrims. The Pilgrims' Hall was built to accommodate pilgrims on their way to Canterbury, which of course was the shrine of Thomas à Becket, and we're only a mile away from the Pilgrim's Way. And we now get a lot of pilgrims who walk the Pilgrim's Way. They begin their journey either in Winchester or London. And that pilgrimage is an important element today. Many of you will have heard of Compostela, the shrine of St. James, and people walking the Camino, the way. Well, people in England also follow the way, the Pilgrim's Way. And what is pilgrimage? Pilgrimage, in a sense, is leaving our everyday experiences, traveling with fellow pilgrims, sharing our story, and sometimes also our pain and sorrows, as well as our joy and laughter. We also welcome large pilgrimages here at Aylesford, different national chaplaincies. We have a Sikh pilgrimage here at the time of the Assumption of Our Lady. We also have other pilgrimages as well for different themes. And we have a lot of school groups that come here as well. So pilgrims come at all sorts of ages and traditions. And the first prior here at Aylesford wished Aylesford to be an open door, that it would be open to everyone, regardless of their creed, their race, their colour.